Welcome to another 4PDP video learning lecture. In this video, we look at topic 9, economic factors. Now, in the use of electricity, we always have to pay for the amount of energy we use. So, in Singapore, there is already a certain structure, especially how our electricity uses are charged based on whether it's low voltage, high voltage, and for those customers that takes in high voltages, there are certain factors that if we are not careful, we have to pay quite a lot of money for it. So let's see how this is done. So this topic covers some basic introduction. What do we mean by demand when we talk about electricity supply? What are the tariffs, charges? That means how much we pay depending on certain parameters, certain characteristics of the electricity supply that we take. And we cover a little bit on this thing called power factor correction, because power factor is a key factor in electrical systems. And finally, a very brief section on energy management, because in a lot of companies' operation, electricity bill is actually one of the highest. So let's move on. Right. Whenever someone applies for electricity, so we term them as consumer. Right. So any one of us who need electricity, we become a consumer. So we need to make an application to Singapore Power, and we need to state what is the quantity, or sometimes we use the word declare, the amount of electricity we need, whether it's high voltage, low voltage, and so on. Alright, and this declared quantity would enable the people from the power supply company to prepare for supplying us that amount of electricity. It may involve upgrading the transformers, whatever switch gear, and running new cables to a project that we have. Right? If the declaration is bigger, which means that the new transformer may have to be brought in and so on. So that will require a higher initial investment cost. So as a consumer, as someone who uses electricity, we have to pay for it. The other tricky point is if we declare a certain amount of electricity we use, and if we don't use it on a monthly basis, we may incur extra charges. So it's important for us to be able to manage that. So let's understand a little bit about what is demand. Right, the amount or the quantity of electricity that a consumer uses at any moment in time is known as the demand. So demand can be measured in kilowatt, kilowatt amps, reactive, or just in ampere. This quantity of electricity that any consumer declare and apply for is called the declared demand. Notice that in Singapore, when the consumer signs a contract with the power supply company, or in this case Singapore Power, that quantity becomes known as a contract capacity. Now, compared to maximum demand, maximum demand is the highest average quantity of electricity used during a given period of time, for example, over one day. And this period of time is measured in either 15 minutes interval, 30 minutes interval, 1 hour, or even longer. In Singapore, we determine this maximum demand over 30 minutes period. Next, we look at what's tariff. Tariff basically means the amount of we pay for the electricity. Now, in general, we have three categories of charges. One is the usage charge. That means for every amount of units of electricity that are used, in our case, we measure it as kilowatt hour. 1 kilowatt hour is equivalent to 1 unit. We also pay for what we call a capacity charge. This is the maximum demand in kilowatt. If we declare a certain amount of kilowatt and every month we don't use it, we pay a penalty. And finally, we also pay a reactive power charge. This is for usually big consumer and has very poor power factor systems. Okay, so usually charges are made on a monthly basis. Alright, let's carry on and look at the tariff. Right, some supply company authority encourage consumer to use high voltage, right? Because high voltage gives me a reduced tariff charge. Later on, we'll look at what kind of charges are we talking about. And then there are other incentives in the form of lower usage charge during off-peak period, and to encourage operations during those times when less people are using the electricity. Electricity tariff implemented by Singapore Power Limited is from based on 1st January 1999. So we have a few categories. One category may be the high voltage. Another category may be extra high tension, or what people call EHT. In all this high supply, we pay for the contracted capacity, for the uncontracted capacity, for usage charge, as well as for reactive power charge. Whereas for low voltage or low tension consumer, we only pay a fixed rate, and usually just based on the number of units that we use. So this is applicable to quite a lot of households situation. Now, the contracted capacity charge, how does that work? When a consumer applies the electricity retailer at 22 kV, say, that means high voltage, he has to state the amount of electricity he requires in kilowatt. This consumer then signs a contract with the retailer. So the amount of electricity in kilowatt is stated in the contract, and this is known as a contracted capacity. And the cost, or this item of the cost, is called the contracted capacity charge. Let's see an example. A company, XYZ, is a high voltage consumer, and the contracted capacity with SP Services Limited is 2000 kilowatt. 2000 kilowatt. So, but if the maximum demand recorded for the first 3 months are as follow, of the year 2000 are as follow: 1800 kilowatt for January, 2000 kilowatt for February, and finally 2100 kilowatt for March. So how much would this company has to pay to SP Services for the contracted capacity charge? Sorry. Contracted capacity charge. right? And if during that period the contracted capacity charge is $9 per kilowatt, then we want to calculate the monthly contracted capacity charge for the month, right? So we need to look at it month by month. So if the contracted capacity is 2000, and in the month of January we use 1800, so the contracted capacity is still 2000 times $9. In other words, even though the usage is lower than the contracted capacity, the consumer pays the maximum, which is 2000 times $9, the maximum contracted amount. Now if we look at the second month is usage was 2000, so it's still charged at 2000, so the amount paid is the same as the first month, January. Right? And then finally the third month, for the third month the usage was 2100. Now this time, although the amount used was, the maximum demand was higher by 100 kilowatt, the contracted capacity charge for the month is still 1800. That means whether you use more or less than the contracted capacity, you still pay the contracted capacity charge. So this is only the first item to be charged. So what happens now is, if there is an excess, just like the example here, how do they pay this? It comes under the next category, which is the uncontracted capacity charge. Right, so for those amount that was used in excess more than what was contracted, it is classified as uncontracted capacity, and the consumer has to pay for this. Right, this charge may be different from the contracted capacity charge. Usually it's higher. So how do we calculate this amount? Let's look at the second example. Second example states that this company, which is a high voltage consumer, and this time the contracted capacity with SP services is still 2000 kilowatt, but the maximum demand for the first 3 months is like this, right? 1800 kilowatt, 2000, 2100. But the uncontracted capacity charge is per unit is higher now, it's 1350, whereas the contracted capacity charge was only $9. So for first month there was no excess. It means no extra uncontracted capacity. So the only month that attracts uncontracted capacity charge is March, where it exceeded by 100 kilowatt. So the computation is as follows. For January, there is no uncontracted capacity charge. For February, again, there is no uncontracted capacity charge because the usage is exactly the contracted capacity. Comparing to January, where it was lower than the contracted capacity. But in March, there was an excess of 100 units. So these 100 units will attract an extra charge, which is $1,350. So if the monthly maximum demand can be reduced to as close as possible to the contracted capacity, then there is no need to pay this extra charge. Okay, so so far we have looked at two charges. One is the contracted capacity charge. The next one is the uncontracted capacity charge. Next, we look at the usage charge. For high voltage consumer, there is one rate. Right? Usually, this could be higher, or this could be lower than for low voltage. So the amount of electricity used per month is the power of the equipment multiply, please remember, it's multiplied by the number of hours used per month. So we call this a usage charge. The rate depends on the time of the day. In Singapore, we adopt two timing. One is the peak period, which is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The other one is from the off-peak period, which is from 11 to 7 a.m. Of course, the rates are usually higher for the peak period, where more people are using electricity. So the purpose of this is to encourage more businesses to use electricity during the off-peak period. Alright, next let's look at example 3 and see how this is done. A high voltage consumer daily electricity consumption is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. The uses 2,100 kilowatt at a power factor of 0.85, whereas between 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. it only uses 1,600 kilowatt at 0.85 power factor. So what we want to know is how much electricity charges we have to pay during the peak period, during the off-peak period, for a period of 30 days, right? Assuming that every day the amount of electricity used is the same. Okay, let's see how do we do the computation. First, we identify the time period for peak usage. So from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is only 11 hours, the amount of units used is 23,100. Whereas from 6 to 11 p.m., which is only 5 hours, the company only uses 8,000 units. So the total amount of electricity used is 23,100 units plus 8,000 units. So total is 31,000 units. That's during peak period. So during off-peak period, that is from 11 p.m. to 7 p.m. I think it should be 7 a.m. Please take note, change this one. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which is 8 hours. The amount of unit used is 12,800 units. So the total amount of electricity used per month is 31,000. Right, 31,000 plus 12,800 times 30 days. So the total usage for one whole month is 1,317,000 units of electricity. Okay, so this example is just more on how do we calculate the amount of units used during the peak period, the off-peak period, and over a 30 days month period. Now, what happens if there is a rate charge? If the rate is 8 cents during peak period and 6 cents during off-peak period, so how much do we have to pay based on the example of example 3? So peak period per day is 31,100 times 8 cents. So the total amount payable during the peak period is $2,488. And during the off-peak period, which is 12,800 units times 6 cents only, so we get $768. So the total for one day is just these two numbers add up times 30 days, and that is the final bill for the month. Alright, so we have seen example 1, example 2, example 3, and example 4. Now we then move on to another important charge, which is the reactive power charge. Now reactive power is power that we need to supply to inductive loads and so on in the electrical system. And this is the energy that is absorbed by the system and returned to the system without really any real physical work. So because this is still a service that needs to be provided by the power authority, so there is a surcharge, or there's a charge relating to it. And how is this charge calculated? It is based on the total kVAr hour use, which is more than 62% of the total kilowatt unit use. So it is a kind of comparison between the reactive and the power portion of the usage. Alright, let's look at this example number 5. A high voltage customer uses 1 million units of electricity, but it only, at the same time, it also uses 550,000 reactive power unit. So we want to calculate the reactive power charge for the month of January, given that the reactive power charge is 0.0072 cents per kVAr hour. Now 62% of the actual power use is 620,000 units. Since the total reactive power used is less than this quantity, the company need not pay any reactive power charge. Right? 0. Because the total reactive power use is less than 62% of the total energy use in units kilowatt hour. Let's look at another example, example 6. This time the same company uses more, uses 650 kVAr hour. So, and if the reactive power is charged as 72 cents, 0.72 cents, this time, whatever is in excess, right, 650,000 minus 620,000, these 30,000 unit kVAr unit will be charged at 0.72 cents. So the company has to pay an extra $216 for the month of February. Another example, a factory in Singapore is operating with a constant load of 250 kVA, 2,500 kVA at power factor 0.85 from 7 AM to 11 PM for 26 days in a 30-day month. During the remaining hour of each working day and for the whole day on Sunday, the load drops to a constant 100 kVA at 0.9 power factor. So we want to calculate the electricity charges of the factory for the month if the factory obtains its electricity at 22 kV and the contracted capacity is 2000 kilowatt. So total kVAr used during the month is 561.088. So how do we calculate this? Let's look at the solution. Right, the tariff provided rates for the different categories are as shown. So the first thing we want to calculate is the contracted capacity. Since the company uses 2,000 unit, has to pay $8 per unit. So this is the first amount the company has to pay. Right. Now the maximum demand 2,500 has to attract a charge of times the power factor 0.85 is actually 2125 kilowatt. The uncontracted capacity charge is just 2125 minus the contracted units. So it is charged at $12, so we have to pay 1500. Then the consumption during the peak period is 2125 times 16 hours times 26 days plus 90 times 16 hours times 4 days. So the total unit consumed for that 1 month is actually 889,760 kilowatt hour of units. Since we have to pay 8 cents per unit during this period, the total amount comes out to $71,180.80. So this is all during the peak period. This one is the total consumption in units. But of this, the peak period charge is this value times 0.8, so I get this. Now the consumption for the off-peak period, that means during outside the peak period hours, is 100 units, which is on the 4 days times 0.9 power factors times 8 and 30. That gives me 21,600 units. So this one multiplied by 7 cents. So this is the charge for usage during the off-peak hour. Then we have to check the reactive power charge. Reactive power charge is it 62% of the total kWh or units used, and that is 889.760 plus during the off-peak period is 21,600 times 62. So that is the amount we have to compare against the reactive power. But the reactive power is definitely less than this amount. So there is no charge for reactive power. So the total electricity bill for this company works out to be 16,000 plus 1,500 plus 71,180 plus 1,512. So the total amount is $90,192. Right, so you need to have a systematic way to compute this. And finally, we have the low tension electricity charge. Now this is very straightforward because whatever units, there is no peak or off-peak period for low tension. So whatever units you consume, you will have to pay per unit is 14 cents. So total consumption is so much, therefore just multiply by 14 cents. So if the same company was using low voltage, this is the amount he has to pay. Right, this is compared to the 90,000 that he has to pay. So there is quite a lot of difference. Alright, for this video we shall stop here. We will continue the remaining part of this topic 9 in another video. Bye, see you.